Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. As always, advert-free. Thank you once again to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Well, I say advert-free. Advert-free as long as I don't accidentally include any background footage featuring a game that's using copyrighted music, even if for only a couple of seconds and some record company decides to claim, monetize and display ads on the entire video. That has actually happened in the past. And I'm sure it'll happen again at some point in the future because record company executives make electronic arts look like saints. I was watching a Corridor Digital video a few months back where they'd had one of their videos copyright claimed by a record company because they included something like 15 seconds of copyrighted music. I can't remember the exact circumstances. It wasn't as if they'd intentionally put the music in, it was just there. In the background of whatever it was they were doing. And of course the record company claimed the entire video. They actually sat down and worked out how much copyrighted material was in the video, and it came to 5%. Here's another one for you. You are aware that I go to events like Tankfest and Tiger Day. Actually, I'm going to Tiger Day this year, next month. More on that in a moment. And while there, I record video of the tanks driving around the arena because that's the main purpose of events like Tiger Day and Tankfest at the Tank Museum in Bovington. Often, while the tanks are driving around the arena, the Tank Museum is playing music over the broadcast system. For example, when they're doing Cold War display, they had Frankie Goes to Hollywood's When Two Tribes Go to War playing over the public address system. Quite appropriate because Frankie Goes to Hollywood were an extremely popular band at the height of the Cold War, so they were playing Cold War music during the Cold War vehicle display. And of course I'm recording the tanks driving around the arena, going through their paces, while Frankie Goes to Hollywood is blasting out of the speakers in the background, and that video got 100% claimed by whichever record company happens to own the rights to Frankie Goes to Hollywood's back catalogue. In fact, I think the video got claimed by 4 separate record companies who all seem to think that they hold the copyright to Frankie Goes to Hollywood. So I've no idea how YouTube sorted out the revenue split on that one with multiple different companies claiming it. And this isn't unusual, by the way. Anytime anything gets claimed in any of my videos, it's normally claimed by a minimum of half a dozen different record companies who all seem to think they own the rights to whatever it is they're arguing over. The only thing that I know for sure is that I don't get to see a penny of it. The thing is, if mistakes happen, I don't anymore. I used to. I learnt my lesson fast the hard way. But I don't intentionally include copyrighted material in my videos. But sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes somebody else is playing music in the background of whatever it is that you're recording. And if the record companies would approach me and say, hey, you've used some stuff that belongs to us, it's in 10% of your video, I would happily pay them 10% of the revenue from the video because, it belongs to them after all. But that's not how it works, is it? No, they take everything. How can this be legal? Well, it turns out it's not. Well, it's not entirely illegal either, but it's kind of complicated. Well, it's not entirely illegal either, but it's complicated. You see, here's the process. If a copyright claim gets leveled at one of your videos on YouTube, then you can either let it ride and the video will be monetized by the rights holder, or you can dispute it. Now, if you dispute it, ads continue to run on the video, but no payments are made until the dispute has been resolved. So when you file your dispute, you have to state why you don't think you've breached anybody's copyright. For example, well, it's not my fault that the Tank Museum were playing music in the background when I happened to be recording their tanks. And incidentally, the Tank Museum have a license purchased to broadcast music at public events. So they're perfectly and legally within their rights to do so. And I was recording that public event. The rights holder then has, I think it's 30 days to respond to your dispute. And they will either say, okay, that sounds fair, and release the claim on your video, which almost never happens, or they can just completely ignore the dispute, and after 30 days it's automatically rejected. At that point, the only thing that you can do is take them to court. and who has the money to take Sony to court. Well, that doesn't sound fair, Jingles. Or you say you can only get justice if you're prepared to pay for it? Well, yeah, pretty much. But that's the way it is. Well, it turns out that there is actually a third option. And I'd like to thank everybody who wrote in to bring this to my attention. There's a YouTuber who goes by the name of MatPat, and he's part of The Game Theorists, a YouTube channel with, last I checked, 12.4 million subscribers. He recently put a video up, and when I say recently, I mean, well, by the time you see this episode of Mingles with Jingles, the video's 2 days old. It currently has well over 1 million views, and it's called Building a Better YouTube, and he's proposing a lot of things that we can do to make YouTube better, but one of them is to do with rights management. It turns out there's a company out there called SuperBAM. I know they sound like a DC comic superhero, but they're a rights management company. And they're effectively doing the same thing that the record companies do to monetize your videos, except they're doing it for you rather than the record companies. So if, for example, I or you upload a video to YouTube that happens to contain 10 seconds of copyrighted audio, and your video gets claimed by a record company for 100% of the value, that's where SuperBAM step in and say, hang on a second, eine Minuten bitte. Your copyright only covers 5% of the audio-visual content of this video, so you can have 5% of the revenue generated by this video, and the other 95% goes to the person who made the video. Or possibly 85% goes to the person who made the video and 10% to SuperBAM. I have no idea how much of a cut they take, but getting 85% of the revenue from your work is better than getting 0. And that's not all they do, because there are a lot of re-uploaders out there. Now, in case you don't know what a re-uploader is, although it should be fairly obvious from the name, a re-uploader is somebody who downloads your content and then re-uploads it to their own YouTube channel and monetizes it. And there's a lot of it about. Now, a couple of years ago, the only way that I would know that somebody was re-uploading any of my content and claiming it as their own would be when you guys emailed me to say, so I was browsing this YouTube channel and I found what looked an awful lot like one of your videos. And then I would have to go and check it out. And there were some tools that YouTube provided for me to basically file my own copyright claim and get it taken down. Again, to YouTube's credit, in the last year or so, they've made it a lot easier to see this sort of thing. I no longer have to rely on people telling me about it. YouTube does give me tools to identify content of mine that's been duplicated elsewhere on YouTube. Just as an example, I'm looking right now at the channel copyright tool on my YouTube creator dashboard, and YouTube has been able to identify 207 of my videos that have been re-uploaded by somebody else. Now, the overwhelming majority of these re-uploads, and I'm looking at like 98% of them, are exactly that. They're re-uploads. They're just straight copies of my videos that somebody else has uploaded to their own channel. There are maybe 3 or 4 of these 207 videos that YouTube's been able to identify. There are compilations where there are 1, 2 or 3 clips from my videos that have been included with other clips of other people's videos, and yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. But it's the other 98%. That's a bit of an issue. I mean, that's a lot of video. And it's mine. The thing is, while YouTube have made it really easy for me to identify where this is happening, the only thing that they allow me to actually do about it is request. Right, not demand. Is request that these videos get removed. Well, what SuperBAM will do is exactly what the record companies do when anybody screws around with their copyright. SuperBAM monetizes and claims the videos on your behalf. The videos stay where they are. You don't have to go through the removal request process, and you're the one who earns the money from them because they're your work. Now, to address the inevitable, oh, but it's alright for you to do it, but it's not okay for the record companies to do it, trolls that are going to pop up in the comments. 1, fuck off. And 2, there's a bit of a difference. We're talking here about people who are using 100% of my content. Not even remotely the same as one of my, for example, Tankfest videos that just happened to include music that somebody else was playing for 5% of the content. which then gets claimed for 100% of the content by the record company. Or Mingles with Jingles a couple of weeks, actually at this point probably a couple of months ago. Actually, yes, it was a couple of months, it was around Christmas, where I was covering the Star Wars Empire at War mod, and forgot to turn off in-game music because, of course, it was playing the Star Wars soundtrack for around about 30 seconds of a 30-minute long video. And, of course, Sony claimed the entire video. So, yeah, not really the same thing, is it? But then again, you knew that, and you're just being a twat. So I refer you once again to point 1. Fuck off. I guess the point here is that digital rights management isn't a one-way street. It can be made to work for you as well if you upload videos to YouTube and you've been suffering from these kind of problems. So I'll put a link in the description of Matt Pat's video. It's been doing extremely well. Like I said, it's had over 1 million views so far. And also a link to Superbam, just in case, you know, it can help. Meanwhile, in other news, it's my birthday tomorrow. I'm going to reach level 50. I'll qualify for an epic mount soon. Yeah. It doesn't really feel like a big deal. 30 was a big deal for me. Hitting 40 didn't feel like anything special, because by the time I reached 40, I'd already been over the hill for 10 years. But 30 was a big deal. Because when you're in your 30s, you can't pretend you're a kid anymore. You know, you can still pretend that you're young, carefree and single when you're in your 20s, but 30 kind of brings it home to you. You're getting old. Rita's going to be 30, well, next year. She's going to be 29 this year, but she's already been moaning about the fact that she's going to be 30 since she was 27. And I think it's hilarious, of course, because I've already been there, seen that and done that. But she turned 27 and all she could do was moan about how she was going to be 30. Yeah, in 3 years. Then she turned 28 and all she could do was moan about how she was going to be 30. Yeah, in 2 years. This year she turns 29, and not until the 1st of July, and she's already started moaning about it. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next year when she actually turns 30. I think she's going to start wearing black or something. Turn into a Portuguese grandmother. I don't know. But it is quite amusing. As for myself, 50, it's not really a big deal. It's just another day, really. I've got nothing special planned. Although because the 10th of March this year falls on Tuesday, and Tuesday is the day when me and my mate Eddie normally go out and do something, because that's the day during the week when he has a day off. So we're taking a bunch of rubbish to the dump. That's my big celebration for my 50th birthday. There's a bunch of old furniture which has just been dismantled that needs disposing of, so that's my exciting 50th birthday. Unless, of course, Rita's got something top secret that she's planning to spring on me, but I doubt it, because if she was planning on doing anything for my birthday, I would have known about it, because she's not capable of sorting anything out by herself. It's just... I'm not kidding here. Every other time she's decided she's going to cook something for me, I've had to go with her to get the ingredients, because if I didn't go with her, she'd come back with the wrong ingredients. Although maybe this isn't such a bad thing, because if I go with her to get the ingredients, I can make sure she doesn't sneak any onions in. I really don't like onions. I mean, I really don't like onions. I can't stand the things. And the very first time Rita cooked me anything special for my birthday, do you remember the infamous onion cake story? Allow me to remind you, and also, you know, for those of you who haven't been around here that long, the very first time Rita cooked anything special for my birthday, this was probably 4 years ago. So she got a bunch of recipes, said, which of these do you want me to make? A bunch of traditional Portuguese recipes. And I said, well, that sounds really nice, but just, you know, don't put any onions in. Well, it turns out that Rita's particular breed of OCD is that she cannot deviate from any written instructions. So if that recipe says, take a whole onion, chop it up, and stir it into the ingredients, then a whole onion is going to get chopped up and stirred into those ingredients. Even if she's making the recipe specifically for somebody who absolutely detests the taste of onions, they're getting onions in their food, whether they like it or not. So she made whatever it was. I think it was actually probably going to be really tasty. It was kind of like, imagine a really big bagel, like a bagel the size of a pizza but hollow, and It's stuffed with chicken and cheese and Frank's hot sauce, and oh, it should have been delicious. But it came out of the oven, still hot. She slapped it down on a plate, she wished me a happy birthday, cut me a slice, and the first thing I tasted when I bit into it was a massive chunk of onion. And thus, the legend of the onion cake was born. And Sammy Hallam even went so far as to paint this to celebrate the occasion. So maybe it's a good thing that I do actually have to go with Rita anytime she's collecting ingredients to cook anything for me, because I can at least make sure that she doesn't try to sneak any onions in. But then again, she hasn't announced that she needs my help to go shopping. So, I don't know. Either she's not got anything special planned, or she's evolved. She's adapted. And she's learned how to go shopping on her own. I don't know. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. Well, anyway, enough about my rapidly approaching senile dementia and Rita's continuing attempts to kill me off with food poisoning and steal all of my miniatures. You know, I think she's standing on the staircase listening.
Yeah, I am. I heard my name being...
Bugger off.
Did you forget something in your back pocket again and you need me?
You're not funny, you know. Bugger off, this is private. This is just between me and 621,000 subscribers.
Whoa.
Yes, well, anyway. I'm sure there was some... Oh, that was it, Tiger Day. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to be at Tiger Day at the Tank Museum at Bovington this year. So yes, I'm going to be at Tiger Day at the Tank Museum at Bovington this year. It's on the 25th of April. One day only, unlike Tankfest. It's a much smaller event than Tankfest, but they do run it twice a year. The good thing about Tiger Day is because they don't have 20,000 people turning up, you can actually get around the museum and see things, and there's not as much competition for space in the arena when you're watching the vehicle displays. So the programme of events for Tiger Day, they've got the Vehicle Conservation Centre open all day. Now this is kind of a big deal, because all of the vehicles that aren't on display in the museum are in the Vehicle Conservation Centre, and there are hundreds of tanks and armoured vehicles in there, and it's only open to the public a couple of days a year, Tiger Day and Tankfest being some of them. So very rare opportunity to see the full collection of vehicles available at the Tank Museum. They've also got various different living history encampments with reenactors around the site. You get to meet the crews, talk to the people who maintain and crew the vehicles in the arena. Photo opportunities with Tiger 131, so you can have a picture taken with the Tiger. And in the arena they're going to have a Second World War display, obviously featuring Tiger 131, it's the whole point of the day. But also a Panzer III, M3 Stuart, Mark III Churchill, Comet, Matilda II, the Fury Sherman, star of the movie of the same name, Leopard 1, Challenger, and M60, all available subject to mechanical reliability. But they also, for the first time that I can remember, they have a working Japanese Type 95 Hago light tank, and I don't think I've ever seen one of those things moving under its own steam before. So that's going to be pretty special. Having said that though, because of what I have planned for Tiger Day this year, I might still not get to see the Type 95 moving around in the arena under its own power, because, well, what normally happens when I go to Tankfest or Tiger Day is that myself and the Tank Museum set aside a 2 to 3 hour time slot on each day where I can meet and greet you guys. Well, that's not going to happen this time around at Tiger Day. Wait, no, don't panic. It's not going to happen because instead of just setting aside 2 to 3 hours, I'm going to be setting aside the entire day. Well, I say the entire day. I mean, you don't want to be standing in a line all day waiting to see me when there are tanks moving around in the arena, particularly Tiger 131 and the Type 95. I mean, there's probably going to be the two main events that most people are going to go to Tiger Day for. So what I plan to do is just be there the whole morning, right up until the point where the actual arena display starts. Or to put it another way, I'm only going to Tiger Day this year to meet you guys, and hopefully spend a bit more time with you guys, because I mean, it's always nice to meet you, but I always feel a bit rushed whenever I'm at a big event like Tankfest, because there's 20,000 people turn up, and they have other guests there that people want to see, so there's a limited time slot that they can provide for me, and it feels like an assembly line. I don't get nearly as much time to speak to you as I'd like. On the other hand, if I turn up at Tiger Day, and I'm not just there for a 2 hour time slot, there's not that many people going to Tiger Day. They usually see about 5,000 guests as opposed to the 20,000 who turn up for Tank Fest. So with less people there and more time for me to be available, I basically get to speak to you for the length of time that you deserve, instead of constantly having Tank Museum staff trying to push people through and get the line moving. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and I hope to see as many of you as possible at Tiger Day 13 on the 25th of April at the Tank Museum at Bovington. Remember, if you are thinking of turning up, Tiger Day and Tank Fest are advance ticket only events, so you must buy the tickets in advance. You cannot just turn up and expect to pay money on the gate and be allowed in. If that's your plan, you're going to be disappointed. Book your tickets in advance. In other news, and appropriately enough, since we have World of Warcraft running in... No, we don't. Where do I get this shit from? Since we have World of Warships running in the background. Oh, God. See, I told you. Senile dementia. Rapidly approaching. You may... I mean, I don't know how many of you keep up to date with the World of Warships dev blog. They're thinking of introducing rocket attack planes with armor-piercing rockets. I'll just let that one sink in for a minute. Like many of you, I suspect, my initial reaction was, what the hell? Oh, great, so now rocket attack planes can fuck over cruisers as well as destroyers. Awesome. But, well, it might work. I mean, yes, rocket attack planes will be able to fuck over cruisers as well as destroyers, but you can angle against armor-piercing rockets. You can't angle against high-explosive rockets. And if carrier players have to choose between high-explosive and armor-piercing rockets, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't have to make the choice, different aircraft, different weapon loadouts, that sort of thing, some of them are going to choose armor-piercing rockets, which means that there are going to be less aircraft flying around with high-explosive rockets, which can only be good news if you're a destroyer player, or a very lightly armoured cruiser player. Also, armor-piercing rockets can over-penetrate, so they would do way less damage to destroyers and lightly armoured cruisers. Or at least, that's the theory. It's all going to have to be tested. But I guess my initial knee-jerk reaction of, oh my god, are you guys on crack? was, well, possibly a little hasty. We'll have to see how it all tests out. But anything that can be done to reduce the amount of pain and suffering that destroyer players have been suffering for the entire 2019 and beyond after the aircraft carrier rework can only be a good thing in my opinion. Finally, I want to conclude this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles with something that I haven't done in far too long. It's been a long time since we had a story, isn't it? So this was actually sent in by my very good friend Ed, who volunteers at the Tank Museum. He occasionally passes along these little snippets of information for me. This is the story of when two cruise liners went to war in World War I. Naval warfare in World War I was famous for seeing some of the last great fleet battles of an era, with scores of battleships raking each other with heavy fire while destroyers, cruisers and others duked it out to gain advantage over one another. But not all of the battles were fought with great guns of focused fire. Some of them were far more peculiar, such as the Battle of Trinidad, the only time two cruise ships have gone to war with one another. The origins of this battle began with the armed merchant cruiser. This role was started by Germany, who, in their typically dastardly, underhanded and cowardly way, would disguise ships to visually look like Allied ships, luring in prey before boarding and sinking them. To respond to this threat, the brave and noble Admiralty did exactly the same thing to counter these Teutonic pirates, and of course gallantly sink any German shipping. This was even used effectively to hunt submarines, who for a while at least would surface, loot, and then sink a ship with their deck guns. But when those ships suddenly whipped out of the canvas and revealed an array of large guns, it was often a brutal and in many cases final surprise for the German U-boat. A third tactic is what led to the Battle of Trinidad. It was noted by Allied intelligence that the Germans were using liners to act as resupply vessels for the German submarines, well out of the way and deep in the ocean, where their supplies could rearm and refuel several vessels, and thus the idea was simple. The British would disguise a cruise ship to look like a German cruise ship, sail to this area, lure the submarines in to fuel up, and once Jerry had fallen for the bait, give her six of the best and send her to the bottom. Except the Hun, ever conniving and deceitful in his approach to warfare, had the gall to do just this himself, and set about converting some of his liners to look like Allied ships for much the same reason. Thus, two ships were converted. The first was the Cunard liner SS Campania, who, upon her completion and maiden voyage in 1905, was the largest of the Cunard fleet, at 198 metres long and weighing in at 19,500 tons. Her top speed, provided by steam turbines, was 18 knots, and when in civilian service had a crew and passenger capacity of 2,650 souls. The Campania was run by Captain J.C. Barr, a lifelong seaman who'd been serving since the Boer War and had a taste for the bravado, famously sailing into a huge storm to rescue survivors from the SS Volturno that had caught fire and was quickly sinking, rescuing 43 souls before she went under. Fitted with 8 4.7-inch guns as well as light machine guns and put under the command of Captain Noel Grant, while Captain Barr was kept as navigator and advisor along with the acting rank of Royal Naval Reserve Commander. Their first mission was to go down to South America and look for any Germans and generally cause as much mischief as possible. After setting sail from Liverpool via Bermuda, she made her way down to the Brazilian island of Trinidad, some 500 miles east of the mainland, where by sheer coincidence she discovered a rival armed merchant who, under any normal situation, might have been able to slip past her. But there was just one little problem. As we mentioned before, it was not just the brave and heroic British merchant fleet that would adopt this procedure, but also the Germans, who disguised themselves to look like honest, hard-working merchants to deceive and use underhand tactics against innocent vessels. One such ship was the German ship SMS Cat Trafalgar. This liner was the more modern of the two, being launched in 1913, and at 187 metres long and 18.7 thousand tons was the smaller but slower of the two, able to reach 17 knots. Named after the Cape of Trafalgar, the 1,600-man vessel was built for the popular German Hamburg to Brazil run. As far as firepower was concerned, the German logic was for lighter, faster-firing guns than the British equivalents. After all, she was expected to fight merchants, not warships, and was therefore equipped with 2 4.1-inch guns and 6 one-pounder pom-poms. She too was run by a naval captain, in this case Lieutenant Commander Julius Wirth, and crewed by a disciplined naval seaman. Her mission was to go down and support the submarines off the Brazilian coast, near a small island called Trinidad. This whole affair might have blown over with no incident, except for one critical event. Because the idea was that both sides were disguising their ships to resemble that of their rivals, and with a vast amount of possible ships to choose from, it would seem that fate was kind of fickle. For the SS Campania had disguised herself as none other than the SMS Cat Trafalgar, repainting her hull and removing a funnel and so forth. The German ship, by sheer coincidence, had disguised herself as... Yep, the SS Campania, adding funnels and painting herself in Cunard colours. Thus, you can imagine the sheer surprise as both ships turned up in the same port, and both captains looked with disbelief as a doppelganger appeared, with both captains looking at their own ships in a reversed role. With an almost chivalrous understanding that neither of the large armed passenger liners were going to be able to fight in the shallow and rocky waters of Trinidad Harbour, and both captains coming from an older, more noble background, neither willing to back down, they sent messages to one another and agreed to set out to a pre-agreed point some miles away north-northwest of the island, reported as 35 degrees west, 26 degrees south, and squared up for a good old scrap. After both vessels had sent messages back to their respective countries informing them of what was about to happen, the two captains ordered full speed ahead and charged one another. Their great ocean liners surged towards one another at full speed. The Campania was the first to open fire with her long-range guns at 8,500 yards, but the shots fell short, while the Germans then began to open up with their smaller but faster guns at around 7,500 yards. Soon both vessels had their ranges locked in and began mauling one another with explosions and fire flashing across both ships. Neither captain adjusted his course, and both were taking heavy damage. After all, these were not armoured ships made for war. Both had large glass and marble structures made for fine dining, not shot and shell, and soon both were rent and torn with multiple hull breaches and mounting casualties. The British ship had great gouges ripped from her sides, and on both vessels the bridges were burning out of control. A lucky hit from the true Campania had grievously wounded the German captain, but this British deck was equally mauled, with many dead and injured or suffering flash burns. The two ships passed each other at near point-blank range, allowing the crews to open up with machine gun fire as well as rifles, pistols and even flare guns from cabins and windows normally reserved for first-class passengers and fine dining. The Camanea, having the speed advantage, that's the actual Camanea, not the German ship pretending to be the Camanea, spun around and latched onto the Cat Trafalgar's stern, while the German ship tried the same thing, but it was futile. Both ships were terribly damaged and ablaze, with fire pouring out numerous doors and hatches, and choking up black smoke indicating severe engine damage. For a while it looked like the victory might go to the Germans, as Camanea began to slow and list due to crippling boiler damage and large amounts of flooding. Yet as the final moments came, the Cat Trafalgar listed suddenly over, her watertight bulkhead shredded by shot, and began to rapidly sink in a cloud of steam, the telling damage from the large British shells evident along her lower hull. The wounded British ship was all but dead in the water, testimony that the Germans had fought well, and the British ship desperately lowering her life rafts, not to save herself but to rescue the German crew in the oily black water. While this was going on, another armed merchant ship sailed into the mix. This time it was the SS Kronprinz Wilhelm, fully intact and ready to fight, but for reasons never truly known she stopped, and then sailed off, with most sources quoting that she believed it to be a trap, or didn't want to be around if any British warships that had been alerted would soon arrive. The Camanea, black and broken, was towed back and repaired in Gibraltar, where many of her dead were buried, and after restoration resumed patrols, assisting with the Gallipoli campaign before finally being scrapped in 1932. For their actions that day, both Captains Barr and Grant were inducted into the Most Honourable Order of the Bath by the King. Along with this was one of the largest collections of medals handed out to any passenger liner, including 1 Distinguished Service Order, 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, and 12 Distinguished Service Medals. And the only reason any of this happened, now bear with me because this can get quite complicated, but the only reason any of this happened was because the German cruise liner Cat Trafalgar had disguised itself as the British cruise liner Camanea, and the British cruise liner Camanea had disguised itself as the German cruise liner Cat Trafalgar, and both ships happened to be in the same Brazilian island at the same time. What were the odds? That's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.